Ladies and gentlemen, let us all rise for the arrival of the Honorable Senate President and the Senators of the Republic of the Philippines.
The 21st session of the Senate in the third regular session of the 17th Congress is hereby called to order. Senator Cynthia Villar will lead the chamber in prayer.
Let us put ourselves in the presence of God. Lord, as we recover from Typhoon Ompong, we give you thanks that you are with us in the midst of all the storms of life. There is no wind, no rushing water, no natural disaster which can separate us from your love for us. Lord, we pray for all those who experienced the wrath and destruction of the typhoon to recover from their losses. We pray for our fellow Filipinos from the mountains of the Cordilleras, northern Luzon, and the plains of central Luzon, and all other parts of our country who have been hit severely. We pray that those who have lost so much would have the fortitude to rebuild their lives. Have mercy on them. We pray for those who are working to assist others, for all government officials, for first responders, medical personnel, for armed service members, National Police Force, safety and recovery teams, public works people, and all rescuers and volunteers. Support them, strengthen them, guide them, protect them as they give of themselves to help others. Lord, over the next few weeks or months, help us experience the gift of your grace so that our planning, our actions, and our response will be filled with your wisdom, will embody your goodness, and will demonstrate your love for all and our love for one another. In your steadfast love and infinite mercy, we turn to you and pray in the name of Jesus Christ, who is the source of our resilience and strength. Amen.
Amen. The Secretary will conduct the call of the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, De Lima, Drilon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Onasan, Ontiveros, Lacson, Legarda, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Pimentel, Poe, Recto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Zubiri, Senate President Soto III.
With 18 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Yes,
Majority Leader.
Oh. Yes, Mr. President. Mr. President, I thought you were going to mention the number of those present.
They declared the quorum already.
Okay, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 20th session, Monday, September 17, 2018, and consider the same as approved.
Any objection? Chair is done. Motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
The Secretary will proceed with the reference of business.
Reference of Business, Bills on First Reading. Senate Number 2006 entitled, An Act Enhancing the Continuing Professional Development of Filipino Workers and Professionals, amending for the purpose Republic Act Number 10912, otherwise known as the Continuing Professional Development Act of 2016, introduced by Senator Joel Villanueva.
Referred to the Committee on Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation.
Senate Number 2007 entitled, An Act Authorizing Public-Private Partnership for the People, P4, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Emmanuel Manny D. Pacquiao.
Referred to the Committees on Public Works, Economic Affairs, Ways and Means, and Finance.
Senate Number 2008 entitled, An Act Prohibiting the Disposal of Electronic Devices at Solid Waste Management Facilities, introduced by Senator Maria Lourdes Nancy S. Binay.
Referred to the Committees on Environment and Health.
Senate Number 2009 entitled, An Act Strengthening the Political Party System, Providing Guidelines Therefore and for Other Purposes, introduced by Senator Win Gatchalian.
Referred to the Committees on Electoral Reforms and Ways and Means.
Resolutions. PS Resolution Number 896 entitled, Resolution urging the Senate Committee on Public Services to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation into the status of public utilities and public services in Baguio City, the Cordilleras, Cagayan Valley, and Northern Luzon after the onslaught of Typhoon Ompong, with the end goals of ensuring the availability and stability of prices of petroleum products, transportation costs, electricity, potable water, and the much-needed improvement of sewerage and drainage systems to avoid catastrophic consequences, introduced by Senator Grace Poe.
Referred to the Committees on Public Services and Public Works.
PS Resolution Number 897 entitled, Resolution congratulating and commending the Philippine Dragon Boat team for emerging as the overall champions in the senior division of the 2018 International Canoe Federation World Dragon Boat Championships at Lake Lanier in Gainesville, Georgia, United States, that was held on September 12 to 16, 2018, introduced by Senator Maria Lourdes Nancy S. Binay.
To the Committee on Rules. Additional reference of business.
Additional reference of business, messages from the House of Representatives. Letters from the Speaker of the House of Representatives dated September 10, 2018, pursuant to Section 16 of Republic Act Number 9367, otherwise known as the Biofuels Act of 2006, which created the Biofuels Oversight Committee, designating the following: Co-Chairman, Representative Lord Alan J. Q. Velasco. Members, Representative Jose T. Panganiban Jr., Representative Ferginel G. Beron, Representative Ronald M. Cosalan, Representative Benjamin C. Agarao Jr., Representative Jericho Jonas B. Nograles, Representative Orestes T. Salon. Pursuant to Section 19 of Republic Act Number 9729, otherwise known as the Climate Change Act of 2009, which created a Joint Congressional Oversight Committee designating the following: Co-Chairman, Representative Joel Mayo Z. Almario. Members, Representative Christopher Esco, Representative Muhammad Khalid Q. Dimaporo, Representative Marilourdes R. Agabao, Representative Micaela S. Violago. Pursuant to Section 103 of Republic Act Number 9593, otherwise known as the Tourism Act of 2009, which created a Joint Congressional Oversight Committee designating the following: Chairperson, Representative Corazon T. Nunez Malañaon. Members, Representative Carlo Alexi B. Nograles, Representative Luis Raymond F. Villafrete Jr., Representative Gil P. Acosta, Representative Tricia Nicola Velasco Catera. Pursuant to Section 18 of Republic Act Number 9501, otherwise known as the Magna Carta for Micro, Small, and Medium Enterprises, MSMSEs, which created a Congressional Oversight Committee designating the following: Co-Chairperson, Representative Dennis C. Laugan. Members, Representative Ferginel G. Beron, Representative Henry C. Ong, Representative Carlo Alexi B. Nograles, Representative Anthony M. Bravo, Representative Ana Marie Villarasa Suarez. Pursuant to Section 17000 of Republic Act Number 10863, otherwise known as the Customs Modernization and Tariff Act, CMTA, which created a Congressional Oversight Committee designating the following: Chairman, Representative Raul V. Del Mar. Members, Representative Daquila Carlo E. Cua, Representative Sharon S. Garin, Representative Alex L. Advincula, Representative Horacio P. Swansing Jr. Pursuant to Section 8 of Republic Act Number 8182 as amended by Republic Act Number 8555, otherwise known as the Official Development Assistance Act of 1996, which created a Congressional Oversight Committee designating the following: Chairperson, Representative Rosenda Ann Ocampo. Members, Representative Daquila Carlo E. Cua, Representative Napoleon S. D., Representative Jocelyn S. Lim Kai Chong, Representative Maria Lucille L. Nava, Representative Strike B. Revilla, Representative Maria Valentina G. Plaza. Pursuant to Section 26 of Republic Act No. 10121, otherwise known as the Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act of 2010, which created a Congressional Oversight Committee with Congressman Amado T. Espino Jr. as ex officio chairperson, designating the following members: Representative Geraldine B. Roman, Representative Leopoldo N. Batawil, Representative Cheryl P. Deloso Montalia, Representative Arlene B. Arcillas, Representative Jonas C. Cortez. Pursuant to Section 60 of Republic Act No. 9003, otherwise known as the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act of 2000, which created a Joint Congressional Oversight Committee designating the following: Chairman, Representative Johnny T. Pimentel. Members, Representative Eileen C. Radaza, Representative Strike B. Revilla, Representative Alberto T. Ungab, Representative Tricia Nicole Q. Velasco Catera. Pursuant to Section 95 of Republic Act No. 9165, otherwise known as the Comprehensive Dangerous Drugs Act of 2002, which created a Congressional Oversight Committee headed by Congressman Robert S. Barbers as ex officio chairman, designating the following members: Representative Leopoldo N. Batawil, Representative Amy G. Calixto Rubiano, Representative Winston T. Castello, Representative Eleanor C. Bulot Begtang, Representative Danilo E. Suarez, Representative Arnolfo A. Teves. Pursuant to Section 9 of Republic Act No. 8240, otherwise known as the Comprehensive Tax Reform Law in relation to Section 11 of Republic Act No. 10351, which amended the Tax Reform Law of 1997 and which created a Congressional Oversight Committee designating the following: Chairman, Representative Johnny T. Pimentel. Members, Representative Daquila Carlo Icua, Representative Jose T. Panganiban, Representative Angelina D. L. Tan, Representative Romero S. Quimbo. Pursuant to the provisions of Joint Resolution No. 2 of the 11th Congress, which created a Legislative Oversight Committee on the Visiting Forces Agreement, designating the following: Chairperson, Representative Feliciano R. Belmonte Jr., Co-Chairperson, Representative Amado T. Espino Jr., Members, Representative Rodrigo A. Abellanosa, Representative Pedro B. Acharon Jr., Representative Rosano Rufino B. Biazon, Representative Danilo Suarez, Representative Luis N. Campos Jr. Pursuant to Section 11 of Republic Act No. 9175, otherwise known as the Chainsaw Act of 2002, which created a Congressional Oversight Committee with Congressman Rodrigo A. Abellanosa as ex officio co-chairperson, designating the following members: Representative Franz E. Alvarez, Representative John Marvin C. Nieto, Representative Edward Maceda, Representative Arlene B. Arcillas, Representative Alfredo A. Garbin. Pursuant to Section 23 of Republic Act 9182, otherwise known as the Special Purpose Vehicle SPV Act of 2002, which created a Congressional Oversight Committee designating the following: Chairman, Representative Celso L. Lobregat. Members, Representative Alejandro Y. Mirasol, Representative Joey S. Salceda, Representative Joselito A. Manalo, Representative Lorna Bautista Bandigan, Representative Bayani F. Fernando, Representative Jose L. Atienza Jr. Pursuant to Section 6 of Republic Act No. 8752, otherwise known as the Anti-Dumping Act of 1999, which created a Congressional Oversight Committee designating the following: Chairman, Representative Joey Mayo Z. Almario, Members, Representative Ferginel G. Beron, Representative Manuel F. Zubiri. Pursuant to Section 19 of Republic Act No. 9160, otherwise known as the Anti-Money Laundering Act of 2001, which created a Congressional Oversight Committee designating the following: Chairman, Representative Arthur C. Yap. Members, Representative Henry C. Ong, Representative Milagros Aquino Magsaysay, Representative Maria Vida E. Bravo, Representative Mark O. Go, Representative Florida P. Robes, Representative Alfred Vargas. Pursuant to Section 9 of Republic Act No. 10708, otherwise known as the Tax Incentives Management and Transparency Act, TIMTA, which created a Joint Congressional Oversight Committee designating the following: Chairman, Representative Peter M. Unabia. Members, Representative Aquila Carlo Icua, Representative Ferginel G. Beron, Representative Manuel T. Sagarbaria, Representative Alberto T. Ungab. Pursuant to Section 33 of Republic Act No. 9369, an Act amending Republic Act No. 8436, entitled An Act Authorizing the Commission on Elections to use an automated election system in the May 11, 1998 national and local elections in subsequent national and local electoral exercises, which created a Joint Oversight Committee designating the following: Chairperson, Representative Delphine G. Lee. Members, Representative Sherwin N. Tugna, Representative Luisa Lloren Cuaresma, Representative Paulo C. Ortega, Representative Jennifer A. Barsaga, Representative Danilo E. Suarez, Representative Francisco G. Datol Jr. and pursuant to Section 17 of Republic Act Number 10931, otherwise known as Universal Access to Quality Tertiary Education Act, which created a Joint Congressional Oversight Committee designating the following: Chairman, Representative Ann K. Hoffer; members, Representative Paulo S. Javier; Representative Carlo Alexi Binograles; Representative Jeffrey D. Congun; Representative Evelyn P. Meliana.
Referred to the Committee on Rules. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I would like to recognize the gallery. Today, we have the Distinguished Secretary of the Department of Trade and Industry, Secretary Mon Lopez, as I fondly call him, Super Mon. And we have with us also the Director General of TESDA, Director General Mamundyong, is with us today, together with officers of the DTI. And we have also DOLE officers, headed by ASEC, Georgie Aragon, is with us today.
Secretary Lopez and the rest of the guests are all welcome to the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move to resume consideration on Senate Bill number 1574 under Committee Report number 161. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection?
The policy.
Chair hears none. Motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is an act establishing Philippine Energy Research and Policy Institute. We'd like to recognize, the status is we are in the period of amendments. We'd like to recognize Senator Sherwin Gatchalian for his amendments, Your Honor, Mr. President.
Senator Sherwin Gatchalian is recognized as sponsor of the measure. We are in the period of amendments, and the amended copy that was given to the members of the Senate is the copy as of September 17, 2018.
Mr. President, the request of the chairman is that we suspend consideration for the moment. He's just waiting for his resource persons for the additional amendments. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Chair hears none. Consideration is suspended.
9-3. Okay. With that, Mr. President, we'd like to move for consideration Senate Bill number 102 under Committee Report number 393. I so move, Mr. President. This is an act on the increasing the number of rays in the sun on the Philippine flag.
Any objection? The chair hears none. Motion is approved.
Mr. President, we'd like to recognize the sponsor. This is the period of interpellation, and to sponsor the measure, may we recognize Senator Richard Dick Gordon to interpellate the Honorable Minority Floor Leader, Senator Frank Drilon.
Senator Gordon is recognized to continue sponsoring the measure, and the Minority Leader, Senator Frank Drilon, is recognized.
Constitutional provision.
Attorney.
So dito wala namang amendment.
Ha? Meron ba?
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the gentleman yield the floor to some questions on the proposed adding of one ray of the sun, in our Philippine flag?
Of course, Your Honor, willingly to my very dear friend, gentleman from Iloilo.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I think the Chamber owes Senator Gordon one for bringing up the topic of the Philippine flag,
Thank you.
because this was hotly debated during the Constitutional Convention, where the good sponsor was an esteemed member. And going through the records of the Constitutional Convention, it indeed generated a lot of debates. And I am glad that today, through this proposed measure, that debate is again revived in order that we can intelligently take a good look at our flag. But maybe to start with, we have flashed on the board for the benefit of our colleagues who may not be very familiar, the history of the Philippine flag. And here we see how it evolved since 1898.
Yes, Your Honor. The Battle of Malapan.
1898. And specifically, would the sponsor confirm that the Philippine flag was first unfurled on May 28, 1898?
Yes, Your Honor. In our beloved province of Cavite, in the Battle of Alapan, were the first big military victory of General Aguinaldo after his return to the Philippines from Hong Kong. Yes, Your Honor.
So that was 120 years ago.
That's correct, Your Honor.
120 years ago. And for 120 years, until today, we had only 8 rays in the sun.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, now. And it was on June 12, 1898, as shown in that, as history will reveal, it was on June 12, 1898, following the proclamation of independence from Spain, that the same flag was waved by at the Aguinaldo residence in Kawit, Cavite.
Your Honor, yes, Your Honor. On Independence Day, it was displayed, and it took place in Kawit, Cavite, Your Honor. It's in the residence of General Aguinaldo.
So, as shown in the chart, from 1899 to 1901, with the proclamation of independence on June 12, 1898, we already we had this flag, only that the red portion was on top, signifying that we were at war with Spain. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, Your Honor. That is the tradition that when the red is on top, that means we are in a state of war.
Subsequently, on with the cessation of hostilities, the same flag was used, only that the blue portion was placed on top, signifying that we were at peace. And from 1907 to 1919, is it correct to say that the Philippine flag was prohibited from being displayed because the Americans, don't put it down, please. The Americans prohibited the display of the Philippine flag during that time?
That is correct, Your Honor. The Americans prohibited it until 1907, if I'm not mistaken, 1907, which outlawed the display of the Philippine flag and replaced the country's flag to the stars and stripes of the United States of America. It's also prohibited the singing of the national anthem or the playing of the national anthem, Mr. President.
And it was only in 1935? Huh? I'm sorry, it was only in 1919 that the Philippine flag was again allowed to be used with its race stylized, but still retained the eight rays.
That is correct, Mr. President.
Now, again from 1919 up to 1936, under Act 2871, as shown there, until 1936, again the same flag was displayed until again from 1936 to 1941, while the rays of the sun were stylized, it still retained basically the 8 rays.
The gentleman is correct, Your Honor.
Now, again, when the World War III intervened, as shown there, we still retain the same tricolors. We retain the 3 stars. We retain the sun and the 8 rays of the sun.
That is correct, Your Honor.
Now, likewise, the emblem of the state, as shown in the chart, the bottom left portion, the emblem is based on the fact that the sun had 8 rays following the Philippine flag.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, can we go back to that previous frame? The 8 rays in the sun represents, for the record, the 8 provinces that took up arms against the Spaniards.
That is correct, Your Honor.
The first eight that took up arms.
During the revolt of Aguinaldo, Your Honor, that is, these are the provinces that joined the revolt: Batangas, Bulacan, Cavite, Laguna, Manila, Nueva Ecija, and Pampanga and Tarlac, Your Honor.
So it is not out of whim that this was that the number was placed at 8. It is based on a historical fact.
Yes, Your Honor, but at that time, that was a historical fact.
Yes.
Although incomplete, if I may say so.
But it's still a historical fact.
That's
in
correct.
fact, Mr. President, let me read into the record the proceedings in the Constitutional Convention on this point, quoting our esteemed colleague, the late Blas F. Ople,
Yes, Your Honor.
who was also in the Constitutional Commission. And let me read it for the record, because this encapsulates the time and the concept why we have 8 rays in the sun. Let me quote Commissioner Ople, former Senate President. Quote, she said, "Very soon we will commemorate the centennial of the Philippine independence, reckoning not from 1946, valid as it is, but from 1898, with the establishment of the first Philippine Republic at Malolos, which was the great watershed for the development of our national identity, pride, and solidarity. These questions about name, anthem, and flag were conclusively settled in 1898, Mr. Presiding Officer. They now enjoy, as they stand, the patina of our history, representing centuries of struggle waged by our forefathers for the liberty and integrity of this country, so as not to tempt any future adventurer in power who may use the authority of Section 2 in this Constitution to make any changes which could prejudice this history of our struggle now embodied in the flag, the name of the country, the national anthem, and the national seal. I think it will be prudent for us to close these issues now in this Constitutional Convention of 1986 with real finality and a clear national agenda of these pending issues, and the ever-present talk that the future of a tyrant taking advantage of this enormous power, including the power of our Congress, may decide to disturb these existing national symbols. It is said that we do not live by bread alone. We live by symbols, including the majesty of national symbols. So this, end of quote. So, Mr. President, it is in this context that we believe that there is enough basis to maintain the 8 rays in the sun unless the good sponsor can really provide us with some reason or some valid reason to add an additional race.
Thank you, Your Honor. I thank Senator Dillon for coming out with the words of we both esteem. I'm witness to that because we were both in Accra Law. We used to talk with Senator Ople, and we both esteem the memory of the great Senator Blas Ople, who's a nationalist, Mr. President, and a Bulaqueño, if I may quote our friend from Bulacan here. Mr. President, if the gentleman would permit me, Senator Ople in his remarks talks about centuries of struggle. And it was quoted by the good gentleman. And I'm not trying to nitpick. He quotes centuries of struggle, which is inherent in the Philippine soul. Obviously, Mr. President, being from Bulacan, a very nationalistic province, Mr. Ople wanted the 8 provinces because that signified sa unang sigaw ng Balintawa, yun ang lumabang kaagad, yung 8 na probinsya na yun, yung 8 bayan ng ating bansa. And there's nothing that can be taken out from them. The point that I want to make, and that is why I would like to state, Your Honor, is that we must create inclusion. Senator Ople himself, sinasabi niya, centuries of struggle. Our national anthem speaks of sa manlulupig, di ka pasisiil, which refers to Lapu-Lapu. Ang mamatay ng dahil sa iyo, which refers to Rizal and our other heroes. Mr. President, from the very beginning, it is an 8 in the heart of every Filipino, and we must teach this upon every Filipino child, that it is an 8 in our psyche, in our soul, in our lakas diwa. Ang kamalayan na tayo ay a freedom-loving people, and that we were ready to die and fight or live for our country. And that is why, Mr. President, when Senator Ople talks about symbolizing the struggles, the acme at that time, the acme of that struggle was when naglakas ng loob sila, si President Aguinaldo, si Bonifacio, na naglakas loob na kahit na walang armas, di sufficient ng armas, lumaban. So at that point, the acme was, and focus was the 8 provinces that joined, Mr. President. It does not also speak of Santa Barbara in Iloilo, where the first flag in Visayas was unfurled in the Battle of Santa Barbara. I think it was General Delgado at that time of the Philippine Revolution that was there. But however, Mr. President, what I'd like to say is, today as we pass the BBL law, we are now talking about inclusion, about unity, solidarity in our country. And it cannot be denied that the Spanish, when they conquered the Philippines, or when they never conquered the Philippines because they never were able to spread their wings all over Mindanao. They never had a continuous blanket of conquest in Mindanao. Cannot be denied that you have a May Pakpak. Cannot be denied that Sultan Kudarat in Mindanao fought against the Spanish. Cannot be denied that there are many other leaders of the Filipinos, and I want them to call them Filipinos because they are from our land. And up to now, I just had a hearing. You had Rashid Lukman talking about, we're talking about Lanao Lake Development Authority. And I'd like to make sure, Mr. President, with the support of Senator Dillon, who I know is a nationalist himself, that we include everybody in our country that has something to do with the fight, and not just limited to 8 provinces, although that is very symbolic. There's nothing that precludes us, Mr. President, because the Constitution provides the description of the flag. It doesn't describe the rays of the sun, though. It talks about the 3 stars and the colors. And in 1985, Mr. President, President Marcos at that time took it upon himself to even change the color of the flag to a lighter blue, because that was the original, according to him. But I think we went back to the royal blue, which I think is right. That's right, Your Honor. So it doesn't mean that just because we are changing it doesn't mean that we are lessening our acceptance. We're not removing the 8, but we're adding a ninth star, which, if I may be so bold, I would even say it was the first star because it was a Muslim Lapu-Lapu who right away told Magellan, you cannot, thou shalt not tread on us as a country or as a people, not as a country at that time. But on the other hand, the other Filipinos in the country also fought against the Spanish conquistadores, and they fought valiantly and won against them several times in our history. In fact, they had more victories than we Tagalogs, we Visayans, than the rest of the country. It was the Muslims that were winning victories and battles against Spain. And that is why, Mr. President, in the long narrative of this country, which was written mostly, ang nagsusulat ng narrative ng ating bansa, ay mga Tagalog na katulad natin. Walang mga Muslim na nagsusulat ng labanan ng ating bansa. Kaya nai-echepuera palagi ang mga Muslim, Mr. President. And that is why I think that we should inclusion should be the policy now, to include our brother Muslims so that no talk of other things of separation can happen. You know, Mr. President, other countries, Mr. President, have already done so before us. The American flag is constantly changed by adding stars. Hawaii, all these other countries, Alaska, even Venezuela, Mr. President, sometime in 1863, added another star to their flag because they forgot about Guyana. And they included Guyana because it was there. We're not, if we're going to include all this, the battles, Mr. President, talagang mahirapan tayo. Marami naman lumaban sa ating bansa eh. But I think a big chunk of our people, Muslims and other ethnics, can be represented in this ninth ray. Kung ako masusunod, they should really be the first ray. Pero let's give it to our heroes like Aguinaldo and Bonifacio and all the others who fought in 1896 right away para mailagay at sumama yung 8. You know, Mr. President, nakikita ko sa ating bansa, palaging ay ang Pilipino. Tinitignan muna natin, sino ba kasama natin dyan bago tayo sumapi? Kaya hindi ko tinatagal po yung 8 pagsali, yung 8 bayan na sumapi kagad kala Aguinaldo. Sapagkat dito sa ating bansa, kung pupunta kayo doon sa ginawa namin doon sa Intramuros, ang sabi doon sa taas, habang lumalaban yung mga Pilipino, yung mga ibang mga elitista, nanonood, at sinasabi, tulungan natin. Walang kalaban-laban yung mga kababayan natin. Ang sabi nung isang elitista, teka muna, hintayin muna natin kung sino mananalo at doon tayo sasaba. Kaya yung 8 provinces na sinasabi, hindi po natin inaalis yun. Pero ang dinadagdag lang po natin ay yung walang pasubali, walang hesitation, no hesitation, right away took up the cudgels for our country like Lapu-Lapu, or like Sultan Kudarat, or like Abay Pakpak and many others, who continued to fight even against America. I mean, President Duterte often refers to that battle in Sulu, yung Bud Ajo. I think that's the name where the Americans massacred Filipino Muslims in that volcano and killed everyone, children and other folks out there. So to my mind, it's time na isama natin ang ating Muslim. I'm not going to get any brownie points, Mr. President. I'm always going to Mindanao as a Red Cross volunteer. I don't see the Muslims as any other Filipino people. To my mind, I think it's important that we recognize in our flag, para isang buhos na tayo, we have our country together again, as the song goes.
Yes, thank you, Senator Gordon, the gentleman sponsor. But just for the record, the debates in the Constitutional Commission would indicate that indeed the Lapu-Lapu and his bravery and courage were recognized, are recognized in our Philippine Philippine flag, as the delegate or Commissioner Suarez said. The red, and let me quote, red in the Philippine flag is already colored with history from the time of Lapu-Lapu, and this means bravery and courage. Having said that, Mr. President, I take note of the statement of the good sponsor that the key today is inclusivity.
That's correct.
Being inclusive, and that is why the proposal to include our Muslim brothers. Shouldn't that principle also apply to the Cordilleras by Mr. President? And during the Constitutional Commission, as the good sponsor would confirm, Cordillera already was being considered as a 9th or 10th ray in the sun. So would this good sponsor consider a 10th ray being the Cordilleras as already debated upon in the Constitutional Convention?
Mr. President, I would consider that, except that I would say that we can expand the 9th ray and say all those that were excluded is now included in the 9th ray, Mr. President. I would accept an amendment to that effect, Mr. President. And rightly so, and
Mr.
debate it here.
President, my own home province of Iloilo also rose in revolt immediately after the declaration in Cavite. Santa Barbara did form a revolutionary government.
That's why I cited Santa Barbara, Your Honor,
Yeah,
even General Delgado.
Except that the principle of inclusiveness should argue in favor of including Iloilo as the 11th ray.
Well, Your Honor, like I said, we could add more rays and more rays,
Yes.
but all I'm saying is the ray, the 9th ray, and let it be known to the whole world that the 9th ray would signify the brightness of the sun, and it starts, it includes all the other provinces that heretofore were not recognized. Mr. President, you know, you and I probably learned about General Delgado, who originally fought with Dewey and turned around and fought against Dewey and displayed the flag.
Yeah.
We only learned about that not in Zaide's history of the Philippines, not even in other writers, but only recently. And that is why it's important that hey, we recognize the 8 rays, but the whole history of the country should be included in a 9th ray. And yung nga lang, the more prominent ones were the Muslims, but I'm not going to take anything away from Iloilo, or for that matter in Bacolod, where there was a fight, Cinco de Mayo. Bohol also, many others.
So, Mr. President, I would like to emphasize and take stronger advocacy that Cordillera should be included. The Muslims should be represented by 1 ray. I would feel bad if the revolutionarios of Iloilo, led by General Delgado, who is now riding on a horse in front of Emperador building in Iloilo. He's there. He has a huge statue. Is that recognized as the 11th ray? And because we talk about inclusiveness, Mr. President. So that is where I am coming from, and I hope the good sponsor can consider these arguments in the effort to recognize the heroism of our countrymen and their fight and struggle for history, and become part of the symbol of our struggle for independence.
I commend the gentleman from Iloilo. I totally respect his views, Mr. President. I have a confession to make. In fact, I started this movement when I was still in UP.
Okay.
When I went to law school, and I spoke with my friends in UP who were Muslims, and we formed the Muslim Progress Movement at that time with the late Ambassador Alunan Glang and also Manny Ortega, the late Manny Ortega. And that's why we were also doing other things like putting Bonifacio monument that was taken out in Caloocan, and we moved it at that time as students in front of the student union. That's why Bonifacio is there. So this is not a flash in the pan, and I'm not saying that I'm being accused of that. I'm just saying that there must be a heuristic notion amongst all of us that accept all these historical events and embrace it. I'm ready to embrace it if the good gentleman will say the Ilonggos, not just Delgado, but Ilonggos fought there. or for that matter, the Cordillerans fought there, and as the American flag shows, every state in the American Union is represented by a star in the American flag. But I think what is stalwart here, what cannot be denied, is that even before Aguinaldo was born, or the others were born, the Muslim Filipinos have been fighting against Spain, against colonial conquest. And they were never conquered, Mr. President. And I'd like to let every Filipino know that there's no difference in the blood of a Filipino, Christian, Muslim, Ilonggo, or Cordilleran, or Hindu, or whatever it is, and that innate in our hearts are the symbols. The flag, after all, is a symbol of unity and sovereignty, and that is defined, Your Honor, in many, many scholarly books. And it is defined as, that includes also the marginalized narrative into the mainstream. We are included, those who are marginalized, into the mainstream discourse of our history. As in the case of Herona et al. Versus Secretary of Education, it says the flag is not an image but a symbol of the Republic of the Philippines, an emblem of national sovereignty, of national unity and cohesion, and of freedom and liberty, which it and the Constitution guarantee and protect. Now, Mr. President, I submit that in our law, in our Constitution, the law talks about the flag of the Philippines shall be red, white, and blue with the sun and 3 stars as consecrated and honored by the people and recognized by law. It is in Republic Act 8491, Flag and Heraldic Code of the Philippines, which says, Chapter 1, Section 4 of RA 8491, the flag of the Philippines, and I quote, the flag of the Philippines shall be blue, white, and red with an 8-rayed golden yellow sun and 3-pointed stars as consecrated and honored by the people, Your Honor. So we can amend this without having to amend the Constitution. And if all of us agree, we can add the Cordilleras, we can add the Muslims, we can add the Lumas. I don't mind, Mr. President, because once in a while, the Tree of Liberty has to be fertilized with the blood of our martyrs and our patriots, quote unquote, Mr. President. Here, in our case, the Tree of Liberty must always be fertilized by the constant discourse, the taking out of events in the past that makes the tapestry of pride in our history enriched, Mr. President. That's my point. And I thank my distinguished colleague and friend for having cited all these things, Mr. President, because there's nothing wrong. After all, the flags will become tattered and they will be replaced, and we will add another 9th ray or a 10th ray or an 11th ray. In principle, I am amenable to that. But, Mr. President, a flag costs 250 pesos. Some of us, you can see in the Congress, they're fighting over billions of pesos right now. Ito, 250 pesos now, Mr. President. And we will replace it, when we approve this, we will replace the flag, including this new version. But the more important thing is when we replace the rays of the sun, there will be discussion in our country schools, in our barbershops, and everywhere, that we are reminding our people that we have a rich past, so that we don't have to go back to Robert Frost's statement of the hired man, of a nation that cannot look back at the past with pride and therefore cannot look at the future with hope, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I congratulate Senator Gordon for that statement, because I would rather debate with him on whether or not we add 1 additional or 2 additional rays in the sun, rather than be confronted with that practice in the House of adding 55 billion to the national budget for purposes of the pork barrel. Really, that angers me. And this is such a more refreshing debate than talking about the 55 billion that they want to insert and in their pockets, rather than for the benefit of the country. It's really, really terrible.
It is, Your Honor.
And this is more, to me, this is a more honorable matter to debate on, rather than the 55 billion pork barrel in the budget.
I am so proud to be debating with the gentleman from Iloilo, because we're talking about something that elevates the country, Your Honor.
That's right. Because, again, let me quote Senator Ople when he said, "It is said that we do not live by bread alone. We live by symbols, including the majesty of the national symbol, which in this case is the Philippine flag, rather than the majesty. There is no majesty in the pork barrel that we
The
can
pork
debate.
in the barrel.
But anyway, Mr. President, just one final point. Would the change in the number of rays also affect the national seal, which have a sun and 8 rays?
I would imagine so, Mr. President, because it would be, it would create jobs for those who will create the new national seals, Your Honor. If only, as an argument, it will create jobs for the
No,
people
but
who...
seriously speaking, it will have to change.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor. Including our maize, I suppose, because the national seal is there, including our flag there.
Yes.
And every time we look at it, it will be something that the Senate has
Yes,
accomplished.
that's right. Even our official seal would have the 8 rays.
That's correct, Your Honor.
At this point, Mr. President, there are a few more points that I would wish
Yes,
to
Your Honor.
discuss. If the indulgence of Senator Gordon, can we suspend our interpellation and bring this up again at the next round?
Of course, Your Honor. Willingly, I would always give way to my good friend, the Minority Floor Leader. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we'd just like to acknowledge, he was here earlier, but I think he had already stepped out, Governor Ramil Hernandez of Laguna. But we have with us today Congressman Emil Ong from Samar.
Welcome
Mr.
to the
President,
Senate.
may we suspend consideration of the bill being discussed on the floor, Mr. President?
Mr.
Senator
President.
Gordon is recognized, yes.
Just for our edification between Senator Dillon and myself and for the rest of the chamber, 2 young pups here, Mr. President, or 2 young lions, if you will, from Bulacan and from Venezuela. Both provinces that were the young lions in the old days, Mr. President. They just pointed out to us, and I agree, that the seal represents the lion of England, if you will, and the eagle of America, Mr. President. Of course, I can always say that that's the Philippine eagle, but we don't have lions here. But, you know, this is, again, that is why symbols are fodder for debate for national symbols are fodder for intelligent debate in the country, Your Honor. I just wanted to add that, if only to make us feel a little better and proud of our country today, Mr. President. Thank you.
Mr. President, I believe instead of, I withdraw my motion to suspend, as Senator Soto would like to ask a few questions. Our Senate President would like to ask a few questions to the sponsor.
Mr. President, will my fellow Letranite answer a bugging question that has bugged me for a number of years already?
Of course, Your Honor, we're Latronites. We're arriba, elevate.
Thank you. Mr. President, while you're in this issue of adding a ray to the sun, I beg your pardon? The minority leader is trying to distract me, Mr. President. But, anyway, levity aside. In the Republic Act that covers the flag, the Philippine flag, I think that's Republic Act 8491, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct, Your Honor.
Right. In Chapter 2, Section 36 of the same law, isn't there a possibility for your committee to look into the possibility of taking a second look at the Philippine national anthem? It's in the same law. It will not be gerrymandering. But I am not suggesting it right now. I'm just saying that perhaps you have looked into this. Might as well look into the entire law, and that includes the Philippine national anthem. Now, why do I say this, Mr. President? Because a number of years already, some people, and mostly composers, writers who I have been rubbing elbows with, have told me that the last 2 lines of the Philippine national anthem sounds like a defeatist attitude because it goes sa aming ligaya na pagmay ng api ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo. Patay na agad eh.
Yes, sir.
There is I have thought of a line that could replace this by using aming ligaya na pagmay ng aapi ang ipaglaban kalayaan mo.
I have no objections to that, Your Honor. I think
Will
that
you
I share the feeling that very defeatist yung ang mamatay ng dahil sa iyo.
Yes,
It's just like the very famous line of Senator Aquino, which I respect deeply, the Filipino is worth dying for. I think we should add the Filipino is worth living and dying for, Mr. President.
So with that, thank you, Mr. President. I hope your committee can look into that possibility so that in the period of amendments, I will be willing to introduce that. And
But that will take the
let's
form
see
of
the
another
feedback. Let's see the
subject, Your
feedback.
Honor. If I take the form of another subject, I would be willing to file a bill to look into that and submit another bill right away as soon as we finish this bill, Your Honor.
Thank you. I submit, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Honor, and I'd like again to commend the Senate President. You see, this is what once in a while a discussion on our national symbols will provoke, that our leaders, and we are leaders of our country, it will provoke discussion to draw out the best in us. And I agree with the observations by the Senate President.
Mr. President, okay, may I just, because some of our colleagues, Senator Ping, Senator Sherwin, and I share the sentiment of continuously ask and pursue that question on whether or not we have lions here in this country. Because as you flashed a while ago, Mr. Chairman, there's a lion and eagle. So we just wanted to find out so that we can sleep peacefully this evening about that particular symbol, Mr. President. Huh?
Well, Mr. President, I without saying that this is any historical leg to stand on, the British once took over this country for 2 years. And you know, the symbol of the England is the 3 lions. I think the eagle we can claim because we have the Philippine eagle and the American eagle was here. So I suppose you will recall that there have been a lot of intrigues about our history, from the sublime to the ridiculous. For example, some say that the Americans deliberately tried to foist Jose Rizal upon us because he was the more peaceful one rather than Bonifacio. Because as they were taking over, they wanted a peaceful Philippines and they foisted Jose Rizal upon us. But again, in the tapestry of our history, Mr. President, our history has never really been as well written as we'd like it to be. There are many, many battles, and I don't mind saying that. I hope you'll pardon my exuberance for my own family's heritage. I'm a Gordon, but I'm also a Filipino Tagle from Cavite, who battled and won the first victory of the revolution and got 30 rifles at the beginning, which grew to 100 rifles after the continuing battle occurred, and we kicked the Spanish out. They kicked the Spanish out of Cavite, and they did not come back until much later on, which is clarifies it as a victory. Now, Mr. President, I think it is very, very important, and I thank Senator Dinan, Senator Soto, and now Senator Joel for bringing this up, because it is important that we don't take our past for granted and that we continue to enrich and embellish our past, because our children are being deprived of the richness of the bravery and courage and the blood spilled by our people. Most of the time, you have often heard ang sineselebrate natin yung mga defeats. The fall of Bataan, where we sided with the democracy, not with America, with the democracies in World War II. We forget the Jose Abad Santoses whose head was cut off, lopped off by the Japanese, rather than join the collaboration in 1941. We forget the Wenceslao Vinsons, who fought against the Japanese, and we forget him. Their family was killed. And I'm sure there are many, many others that we have not learned about. Senator Dillon at the cloakroom, or rather the refectory earlier, was talking about, we are celebrating Yamashita's surrender in 2 days, 2 separate days. One in Ifugao and one in Kiangan, in Benguet. You see, that's how we have written our history. We've taken it for granted. There is no deeper research on the matter, Mr. President. Now, Mr. President, heraldic lions have always been there. In fact, in many, many other countries, Mr. President. The sea lion in classical heraldry is defined as a half lion on the upper part and half dolphin, a fish in the classical tradition on the lower part. It has been the single constant identifying symbol of the governing authority of the Philippines since the Spanish conquest, originally part of heraldic blazon, the coat of arms of Manila under a Spanish royal grant of 1596 and adopted on May 30 of that year. And this is by, in 1609 by Antonio Morga. Just a moment, Mr. President, we lost the link. But this is exactly what we're talking about. Other countries have the unicorn, which doesn't really exist. It's a mythical character, a mythical figure. But in our country, it could be mythical. Like I said, I lamely explained the lion perhaps because of, again, our colonial past. In 1609, Antonio Morga would describe as His Majesty Philip II, our sovereign, by the way, with all due respect, he's already passed away, gave the new kingdom of Castile, of which by his royal privilege he made the city of Manila the capital, giving to it as a special favor among others a coat of arms with a crown chosen and appointed by his royal person, which is his cushion divided across and in the upper part of a castle on the red field and in the lower part of a lion of gold, crowned and rampant, with a naked sword in the dexter hand and half the body in the shape of a dolphin upon the waters of the sea, signifying that the Spaniards passed over them with arms to conquer this kingdom for the crown of Castile. Mr. President, remember that the crown of Castile at that time was the sea power that so much so that the Pope had to issue a bull at that time dividing the world between Portugal and Spain, Mr. President. And that is why all this historical net is being dragged by us, and it is appearing because in the coat of arms of Manila, there is the half lion, half sea lion, and half dolphin in the seal. But I think the more appropriate thing that we're discussing here is the braveness, the courage, the enshrined natural tendency on the part of the Filipino in his nature to fight for his freedom. And that is what we're studying here for today. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to our distinguished senator from Olongapo City. We appreciate the crash course on flag history and symbolism. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I move to suspend consideration of the said measure. Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Thank you. Mr. President, we'd like to recognize the First Secretary of the Embassy of the Republic of Korea. First Secretary Jong Yup Lee is with us in the gallery. And with the permission of the body, Mr. President, we'd like to resume consideration of Senate Bill number 1976. This is an act to further strengthen the Philippine Coconut Authority. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
The status is we're in the period of interpellation. Mr. President, our members no longer would like to interpolate the measure except proposed amendments with the permission of, is it okay, sir? Sa PCA para maka-amend na siya.
Yeah, just
Oh, Mr. President, we'd like to recognize the Minority Floor Leader.
minority leaders recognized. We were listed previously as one of those interpolating. Going over the measure, we really have no questions to raise, and therefore we will not avail of the period of interpolation.
Thank you. Thank you to the Minority Floor Leader. Mr. President, with that, we move to close the period of interpellation.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, we move to open the period of amendments. Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
May we recognize the sponsor, Senator Villar, and to propose amendments, Senator Francis Kiko Pangilinan.
Senator Pangilinan is recognized.
Yes, Mr. President, we only have one amendment, Mr. President, and that would be an amendment of the title. Mr. President, the title reads, an act to further strengthen the Philippine Coconut Authority, PCA, repealing PD number 1468, otherwise known as the Revised Coconut Industry Code of 1978 as amended. Mr. President, based on the discussions in the bicameral conference committee on the trust fund measure, it was agreed that we would reconstitute the Philippine Coconut Authority Board and that a measure would be submitted, a separate bill would be filed, and a separate law would be passed reconstituting the PCA charter. As such, Mr. President, we are not repealing PD 1468. We are merely amending the same. And as such, therefore, the title should read, rather than repealing PD 1468, it should read amending PD 1468.
Mr. President, we accept the amendment.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. The title should have been the last to be amended based on our practice and tradition, but this was just sent to me, Mr. President. Section 14 of the said bill should likewise conform with such an amendment, the earlier proposed amendment. Presidential Decree 1468 as amended is hereby amended? Or just yes, so we will just delete the first sentence of Section 14 in the proposed measure. Section 14 will therefore read, repealing clause, all laws, decrees, orders, and issuances or portions thereof which are inconsistent with the provisions of this Act are hereby repealed, revoked, amended, or modified accordingly. We are deleting the first sentence, which reads, Presidential Decree 1468 as amended is hereby repealed. So moved, Mr. President, if the...
We accept the amendment.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
No other further amendments, Mr. President. We'd like to thank the Senator Villar for accommodating our proposed amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with that, there are no other members who would like to propose amendments. We move to close the period of amendments. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
Mr. President, with that, we'd like to move to approve on...
Just before we proceed with the approval, just for the record, Mr. President, we would just like to place on record, and I clarified this with a good sponsor, that the fit and proper rule of the GCG my understanding is that with respect to the 6 new members of the reconstituted board who will be farmers' representatives, that the fit and proper rule of the GCG will not apply with respect to their possessing management skills and competence, preferably relating to the operations of the PCA in this respect, in this regard. Just for the record, Mr. President. We have
Noted.
no, yes. For the record, for that, that it be understood that they are exempt from the fit and proper rule of the GCG. Thank you,
Noted.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're good? Thank you, Mr. President. With that, we'd like to reiterate a motion to approve on second reading Senate Bill number 1976, the year that we were born, Mr. President, you and I.
I'm 78, Majority Leader.
Excuse me, I stand corrected.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we move to suspend consideration of the same.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
Mr. President, we'd like to resume consideration on, which one was that he was going to? 1558. We'd like to resume consideration on Senate Bill number 1558. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
With the status, Mr. President, we're in the period of interpellation. We'd like to recognize the sponsor, Senator Risa Ontiveros, to sponsor the measure and to interpellate the distinguished Senate President. I believe the Senate President is in the restroom. We'd like to ask for a 1-minute suspension, Mr. President.
Session is suspended.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much. Will the distinguished lady favor us with answers to our part 2 of our interpellations on Senate Bill, proposed Senate Bill 1558?
Very gladly, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, at the outset, I would like to place on record the fact that I support the measure,
Thank you, Mr.
except
President.
for a few points that I would like to be enlightened on, or perhaps an amendment accommodated at the proper time.
Yes, Mr.
So, may I call your attention to page 2, line 2, and find out why the phrase "with no intent to harass" added. Because, Mr. President, this being a special law, intent is never an element in the commission of the prohibited act. So why do we need to include this phrase, "with no intent to harass"?
Mr. President, saying first that in certain violations that or prohibited acts that are identified by this bill, intent may play a role. The intent of the line or the phrase on page 2, line 2, pointed out by the good Senate President, is to indicate that there may be certain expressions of indigenous culture or certain expressions of indigenous tradition pertaining to indigenous peoples in the Philippines, which, if taken out of their indigenous context, may be interpreted by lowland, mainstream Filipinos such as us as falling under the prohibited acts identified by this bill. And this phrase, Mr. President, would probably be even better, more concretely and specifically defined or delineated in the implementing rules and regulations of this bill if and when it is passed into law, Mr. President.
It's like the act is wrong, so you need not look into the intent. And this is a special law. I'm sure the lawyers in the hall understand what I mean. That intent is never an issue in a special law.
Mr.
Anyway, yes.
Yes, just to add, Mr. President, if all of us were already as enlightened as the good Senate President, that we would interpret and engage all expressions of indigenous culture and all expressions of indigenous tradition as not akin to any of the prohibited acts which may be identified by this bill, then perhaps there would be no need to include such a phrase as "with no intent to harass." But aware, Mr. President, that in current Philippine society, where we are still working towards complete or more complete inclusiveness and diversity between and among mainstream, lowland people such as us, the majority of Filipinos, vis-a-vis indigenous peoples, then that is the reason that this phrase was included. But again, as mentioned also by the good Senate President in his introductory remarks to this part 2 of the interpellation, at the proper time, I would consider a proposed amendment that still upholds legitimate expressions of indigenous culture and tradition, while at the same time addressing the concern that the good Senate President is raising, Mr. President.
Yes, perhaps you may be able to spread also into the records, no, so that it would enlighten those who will look into this journal, the scholars of the future. Who do we mean by this indigenous culture and tradition? Who are they?
Indigenous peoples, Mr. President, would be those ethno-linguistic communities identified by the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, to include, for example, the indigenous peoples of the Cordilleras, indigenous peoples among many of our lowland provinces, and of course also indigenous peoples of the current autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao, which the Congress of the Philippines has recently passed an historic law about in the Bangsamoro organic law. And in more popular language, Mr. President, the indigenous peoples of the Philippines could be described as those living and practicing non-mainstream cultures, Mr. President.
We would like to ask that this distinguished lady give us a copy of those covered under indigenous culture and tradition.
I will gladly do
yeah.
so,
Thank you.
Mr. President. And as I mentioned, the IRRs, the future IRRs earlier, perhaps, Mr. President, we could even include specific indigenous practices referred to by this phrase in the IRR, Mr. President.
Okay, let me move forward then. I will await the submission.
Yes,
In page 2, section 4, sa paragraph 1, in the gender sensitivity seminar provision, it's mentioned that it will be conducted by the Philippine Commission on Women, the PCW. Now, just to be clear, will the program of the PCW cover women offenders against a male victim? Because I have the impression that seminar conducted by PCW will cater only to educate male offenders against women victims. So can you provide us a copy of your proposed scope of the gender activity seminar?
Yes, Mr. President, I will be glad to do so. And there, the good Senate President will see that the participants in these contemplated gender sensitivity seminars will certainly include women who may be identified as offenders under this law in a minority number of cases of sexual harassment on the streets or in public spaces, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you. In page 3, lines 19 to 21, it says that nothing in this proposed law shall prevent LGUs from imposing heavier penalties. Now, the question is this not violative of the constitutional principle that local government units are not or are able to legislate only by virtue of the delegation of legislative power from the national legislature? That the delegate cannot be superior to the principal or exercise powers higher than those of the latter. This is already there is jurisprudence to this. This is the SC ruling in Magtajas versus Price Properties Incorporated, GR 111-097, 20 July 1994, SCRA 255, 234, SCRA 255. So, I don't think we can do this.
Noting first, Mr. President, that in other jurisdictions in our region, for example, Singapore, which already criminalizes sexual harassment in public spaces, that the penalties are heavier. Nonetheless, Mr. President, at the proper time, I would accommodate a proposed amendment from the good Senate President on this section, Mr. President.
All right, thank you. Now, related to that, or my previous question, is Section 9 of this proposed measure on the duties of local government units, which states that the LGU is mandated to pass an ordinance which shall localize the applicability of this act within 60 days of its effectivity. Now, the question is it not this provision unnecessary due to the fact that this bill is intended to be of national application, unlike the local bills that we have been passing, sponsored by Senator Angara, that has limited application or applicability. Therefore, passing an ordinance is not necessary.
It may be, Mr. President, in certain local government units where their intent may be to pass an identical ordinance to the national law, that what the good Senate President has said will be absolutely true, that it would be superfluous, it would be a mere duplication. But the important word in this Section 9, letter A, is localize. So if there may be particular conditions obtaining in that local government unit, which its local legislative council may see fit to include in a local ordinance, then it would not be a mere superfluity, or certainly it would not be harmful, Mr. President.
I hope it is not thought of that way, and this will not become a precedent, because under the same section, you have a subparagraph which says the LGUs shall discourage and impose fines on acts of sexual harassment as defined in this act. So is the fine mentioned here on top of the penalty that we are already imposing in Section 4 of this bill? So an ordinance may enact more penalties or more fines?
I believe, Mr. President, that in the earlier question of the good Senate, or to the earlier question of the good Senate President, I indicated that at the proper time, I would accommodate an amendment on that previous section on page 3, lines 19 to 20. Which reads, at the present, nothing in this law shall prevent LGUs from coming up with ordinances that impose heavier penalties. And therefore, in the interest of consistency, I would also, at the proper time, accommodate an amendment on this page 5, line 17, regarding imposing fines, Mr.
Yes,
President.
and perhaps we need not delete the entire line
Yes,
if
Mr. President.
we replace shall with may.
Yes, Mr. President.
Sapagkat pag sinabi mong shall, kailangan gawin nila eh. Hindi ba? Now, okay.
Yes, Mr. President. At the proper time,
Thank you
I will
for
consider
that. Thank you for
Thank you, Mr.
accepting that at the proper time. Now, in Section 5 of the bill, on the authority to apprehend gender-based street harassment perpetrators for light and medium offenses, the enforcers of the Metro Manila Development Authority, or the MMDA, will be deputized to be anti-sexual harassment enforcers, she, for Metro Manila. Now, as such, the MMDA enforcers shall be authorized to receive complaints in the street and immediately apprehend the offender if caught in what they call flagrante delicto. But, Mr. President, based on the charter of MMDA, its primary mandate is to perform planning, monitoring, and coordinative functions, and in the process exercise regulatory and supervisory authority over the delivery of metro-wide services within Metro Manila without diminution of the autonomy of the local government units concerning purely local matters. Now, the said law of the MMDA did not mention maintenance of peace and order, among others, as functions of MMDA. And I know this for a fact because I am the principal author and sponsor of the law creating the Metro Manila Development Authority in the 9th Congress. So, considering that, does this bill amend the charter of the MMDA by giving them additional functions similar to that of the Philippine National Police?
No, Mr. President, the bill does not attempt to to amend the mandate or the charter of the Metro Manila Development Authority. And in fact, it could be seen as fleshing out one of the mandates mentioned by the good Senate President just now, that of the regulatory function. So the bill seeks that the MMDA would deputize its enforcers to be anti-sexual harassment enforcers, or ASHIs. And the bill sees that this is consistent with the given mandate of the MMDA, Mr. President.
Yeah, in the bill you are, no, perhaps what you said would be, it'll be more acceptable if you said the PNP will deputize the MMDA. The MMDA cannot deputize their enforcers to do that, to maintain peace and order. But the PNP may do so. Now, in your bill, you are deputizing, the PNP deputizes, So perhaps you can just place the same proposal instead, removing that and allowing PNP to deputize.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for that good advice from the good Senate President. I will get to work on it right away. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you. Now, does your bill amend or repeal Republic Act 7877, otherwise known as the Anti-Sexual Harassment Act of 1995?
No, Mr. President. In fact, this bill seeks to strengthen further the current anti-sexual harassment law by complementing it. I actually, Mr. President, have two
Complementing
bills.
or amending? Forgive me.
Strengthening it, Mr. President.
Strengthening it.
Yes,
And,
Mr. President.
Are we amending it?
No, Mr. President, we are strengthening it. Currently, the anti-sexual harassment law identifies, prohibits, and penalizes acts of sexual harassment by superiors to their subordinates. But one of my other bills, Mr. President, seeks to introduce the offense of sexual harassment even by a subordinate to a superior. And this particular bill on safe streets and public spaces seeks to introduce the offense of sexual harassment between complete strangers and on the streets and other public spaces, Mr. President, thereby filling the current gaps observed in our current anti-sexual harassment law.
Well, I will be happy to look at those gaps because the way I see it, it seems or it appears that many substantial provisions of the Anti-Sexual Harassment Act have been copied and rewarded in this bill. So it's a repeal. It's not just an amendment.
Oh, actually, Mr. President, I was just about to, following on the line of questioning of the good Senate President, to concede, to submit that indeed this bill seeks to strengthen the current anti-sexual harassment law by way of amending it. So not repealing, but by amending it, Mr. President.
It doesn't appear that way, but we will accept the opinion of the distinguished sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Now, well, yeah, okay. Let me move on so that our colleagues would be able to see where I'm coming from. In page 4, line 13, what is the rationale of specifying a government agency that is offering frontline services? Why not include government agencies, all government agencies, and not just frontline services?
This is to give emphasis, Mr. President, that in the premises of government agencies where there is direct contact with the citizens, with government's constituents, and where the standard or for the quality of service rendered is especially high, that if in this setting the sexual harassment occurs, then the penalty next higher in degree will be applied, Mr. President. So it is to show that there is there's an even higher standard, because such offense does not inspire confidence in the civil service, and it violates that higher standard of conduct of those who work in government. Therefore, this is the rationale for the qualified offenses in Section 6 of this bill, Mr. President.
Now that you've mentioned about penalties or the acts punishable, this is partly why I think we are repealing and not amending. Under Section 4 of your bill, the acts punishable are enumerated. The acts that you are enumerating are already punishable under our present revised penal code. Let me continue. For acts under light violations, such as cursing, catcalling, the said acts are under article or punishable under Article 287, Paragraph 2 of the revised penal code for the crime of unjust vexation. Unjust vexation is any human conduct which, although not productive of some physical harm, would, however, unjustly annoy or vex an innocent person. Now, under the revised penal code, unjust vexation is punishable with arresto minor, or 1 day to 30 days, and a fine not exceeding 40,000. The penalty provided by the revised penal code is equal in terms of imprisonment, and the fine is higher than in our proposed bill. Parang ibinababa natin. And then, also, to continue, under medium violations in this bill, the act of making offensive body gestures at someone or exposing parts for the sexual gratification of the perpetrator are already punishable under Article 200 of the revised penal code for the crime of grave scandal. Now, under the revised penal code, grave scandal, when a person shall offend against decency or good customs by any highly scandalous conduct, these must be committed publicly and have given rise to public scandal to persons who have witnessed the said indecent act. The penalty is arresto mayor and public censure, which is 1 month and 1 day to 6 months imprisonment. This imprisonment is equal to the proposed bill. Well, it's, but again, meron na. Now, thirdly, under the severe violations for acts such as touching or brushing against the body of a person or brushing against the genitalia are already punishable under the revised penal code and the special penal law. Now, the said brushing against the body of a person may be punishable under Republic Act or Article 336 of the revised penal code for acts of lasciviousness, punishable by prisión correccional, 6 months and 1 day to 6 years imprisonment. And this is higher than our proposed penalty in the bill, which is only arresto mayor. Also, Mr. President, the act of brushing against a genitalia is punishable by another article, 266 of the revised penal code for the crime of rape as sexual assault, which is punishable by prisión mayor, 6 years and 1 day to 12 years imprisonment. And this is higher again than our proposed bill. So, why are we criminalizing the acts mentioned in the bill when, well, first of all, why are we lowering the penalties? We will be amending the revised penal code and we will be lowering the penalties, while it is already in the revised penal code and it imposes higher penalties. So why do we want to do this, Mr. President?
Thank you very much, Mr. President, to the good Senate President for noticing and pointing out what may seem to be a lowering of penalties. I would like to note that the penalties proposed in this bill for light, medium, and severe violations from first, second to third offenses would be a package of penalties to include community service, gender sensitivity, seminars, and the like. But if the good Senate President, in the period of amendments, would like to propose raising those penalties that he has mentioned and which are lower in the bill, I would be very open to that. I appreciate also very much the Senate President mentioning other laws that would seem to already cover sexual harassment in streets and other public spaces, because that observation will show us where the gaps in the current laws are, which are sought to be filled by this Safe Streets and Public Spaces Bill. For example, acts of lasciviousness. Currently, under the revised penal code, acts of lasciviousness require the touching of genitalia and do not make a distinction as to whether the crime was committed in a private space or a public space, which the latter is the point that the Safe Streets and Public Spaces Bill wishes to make, that sexual harassment occurs in public spaces. Also, the revised penal code, yes, provides for penalties for unjust vexation, but as currently defined, unjust vexation does not require a sexual element and is blind to gender, whereas the Safe Streets and Public Spaces Bill points out that sexual harassment is precisely of a sexual element and is not blind to gender. In fact, victimizes the individuals based also on that category of gender. And also, the revised penal code identifies rape and sexual assault acts, but under the RPC, these acts do not include non-physical sexual assault. For example, verbal sexual assault that also degrades or objectifies women. So, Mr. President, the penalties sought under the Safe Streets and Public Spaces Bill seek to provide a package of penalties. But as I mentioned earlier, I would be open to accept if the good Senate President would propose higher penalties in the period of amendments. So the bill seeks to propose a package of penalties cognizant precisely because sexual harassment in public spaces is a category of offenses that are not adequately identified and provided for penalties for under the existing revised penal code, Mr. President.
But just one point before I go back to pencil pushing and research, because I'd like to study what the impact of this bill would be on the revised penal code, even if we raise the penalties. And don't talk to Manny Pacquiao about raising penalties. He might suggest firing squad.
There's no death penalty in the bill, Mr. President.
Just one last point. You said that the revised penal code issue on the acts of lasciviousness and the like is blind to gender. Isn't it not good that it should be blind to gender?
Unjust vexation is the example I gave, Mr. President, of an offense that under the current revised penal code is blind to gender.
Then it's good.
Actually, Mr. President, that is seen, the blindness to gender is seen as a gap in the current revised penal code, a gap that the Safe Streets and Public Spaces Bill seeks to fill.
But can you educate me on what is the gap? Give me an example, Mr. President, like I was in grade 3. I do not understand.
Yes, Mr. President, the Safe Streets and Public Spaces Bill seeks to prohibit certain acts and provide penalties for them for acts of sexual harassment against individuals because of their actual or perceived sex or gender, to include their gender identity, their sexual orientation, their gender identity, and gender expression. The bill considers the blindness to these aspects of the criminal offenses as a gap because it leaves victims or survivors of this kind of sexual harassment on streets and in public spaces bereft of remedies when they cannot argue or prove before a court that precisely they were subjected to these acts of sexual harassment in those public spaces because of their actual or perceived sex and gender, Mr. President. For example, Mr. President, calling a gay person names like Salot ng Lipunan, these are not yet covered. These are not yet perceived by the eye of our revised penal code as sexual harassment, but the Safe Streets and Public Spaces Act seeks to provide greater vision in these matters, or to relieve the blindness of the law in this matter, Mr. President.
Isn't it better if it's applicable to all? Therefore, we should be blind to gender, whether the person is male, female, or gay, or whatever.
Definitely, Mr. President. The bill is for everyone because everyone has a sex, everyone has a gender, everyone has a gender expression and gender identity. Just to give additional concrete examples, Mr. President, I said in earlier interpellations that most of the victims of sexual harassment on streets and in public spaces are women. But there is also a minority number of victims and survivors of sexual harassment on streets and public spaces who are men. Some of these may be gay men, some may also be straight men. A gay man may be taunted as a softie for appearing so-called soft on the streets. A straight man may also have recourse to the Safe Streets and Public Spaces Bill or law if he feels that he has been sexually harassed by another person because of his actual or perceived sex and gender as a straight man. So in this way, Mr. President, definitely the bill is for everyone because it seeks to provide every individual of whatever sex, of whatever gender, relief from sexual harassment on the streets and in public spaces.
If
Mr.
it's for everyone, then why are we removing the, why are we not allowing it to be blind sa gender?
We are not allowing it to remain blind to
it should
gender,
be,
Mr. President.
to be applicable to all, it should be blind to gender.
On the other hand, Mr. President, in the same way that our human rights laws are not blind, for example, to nationality, to class, to region of the world where these laws may be invoked in order to receive justice for human rights violations. In the same way that our international humanitarian laws are not blind to whether the persons seeking redress of grievance under international humanitarian law are claiming violations by state actors or by non-state actors. In the same way, it is for the good of our citizens and for a more and more progressive body of laws over time that our laws become sighted and not blind to different aspects of the humanity of its citizens, as well as to different aspects of the humanity or the different characteristics of those who are accused or suspected as violators, Mr. President.
Forgive me, Mr. President, the distinguished sponsor, but I really feel it just caught my attention now that the bill is limiting, because in the title itself, an act defining and penalizing gender-based street and public places harassment. Bakit di na lang defining and penalizing street and public spaces harassment, expanding the definition of, para yun nga, blind to gender. Anyway, perhaps at the proper time we will propose
Perhaps
an
at the proper time,
amendment.
Mr. President.
Thank you.
Additionally, Mr. President, there are certain acts that are specifically done to demean a person because of their gender. And these kinds of acts are not yet captured by the revised penal code, but may be captured by certain provisions of the Safe Streets and Public Spaces Bill, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wish to thank the distinguished sponsor. We will, as I said, research and look at the impact on the revised penal code and perhaps wait for the period of amendment. The Minority Leader wishes to be recognized, Mr. President.
Yes, just on the point, Mr. President, with your permission.
Minority Leader is recognized.
Yes, with the permission of the gentle lady and the gentleman on the floor.
Yes, Mr.
I was listening to the debate. I was wondering, Madam Sponsor, are the penalties in the proposed measure in addition to the penalties under the revised penal code for the same acts committed?
No, Mr. President, they are not in addition.
They are not in addition.
I'm sorry, Mr. President.
What?
I stand corrected. I wish to correct myself on the record. They are in addition to the penalties prescribed by the revised penal code, Mr. President.
So that, let's say, unjust vexation, as pointed out by the Senate President, what is the penalty proposed under the bill that is under sponsorship today, Mr. President?
The acts that are considered under the revised penal code, unjust vexation, are I will get back to you on that, Mr. President.
Anyway,
which
just,
are the acts
we don't
considered
have,
under
the
unjust vexation.
principle that I hear from the good sponsor is that the penalties under the proposed measure are in addition to the penalties imposed for the same crime under the revised penal code, as for example, in the case of unjust vexation, the offender can be prosecuted twice under the revised penal code and under the special law.
Yes, Mr. President.
All right, and this is because on the principle that this is a special law which deserves a different penalty.
Yes, Mr. President.
Now, are the elements the same between the unjust vexation under the revised penal code and the acts classified as unjust vexation under this measure?
There would be some overlaps in the elements, Mr. President, but since the Safe Streets and Public Spaces Bill seeks to explicitly add the sexual element and explicitly add the gender element, then there may be elements that are not captured by unjust vexation, but would be captured by this Safe Streets and Public Spaces Bill, Mr. President.
So this is not the unjust vexation per se punished under the revised penal code.
That is
Just
correct,
for the
Mr.
record.
President.
Is that correct, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President.
And that is why the penalties are, the penalty under this bill would be independent of the penalties under the revised penal code.
Yes, Mr. President.
And the offender can be punished, can be prosecuted for both.
Yes, Mr. President.
Just for that clarification, I hope we have been able to clarify this thing. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. We move to suspend consideration of the same.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
Mr. President, we just like to, thank you. We'd just like to recognize, we had with us earlier in the gallery Chairman Popoy de Vera of the Commission on Higher Education. We also have with us today freshman constitutional law students from Philippine Law School, headed by their class president, Mr. William I.
Welcome to the Senate.
So, Mr. President, I move that we ask for 1 minute suspension, Mr. President.
Session suspended.
Si Sherwin lang, mag-amend lang, approve na kagad. Yung sa kanyang Policy Institute. May we look for Senator Gatchalian? Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before we move to other matters, Mr. President, can I elect the other members already, sir, sa BICAM, sa Dingbaksya? Yeah, Mr. President, we'd like to elect additional members to the BICAM to tackle the issue on Dingbaksya and dengue vaccines.
Mr. President, we would like to move for the addition of Senator Risa Hontiveros, Senator Coco Pimentel, and Senator Sherwin Gatchalian. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
He's also there. He's there now. Kasi we need 7, so 2 minority. Oh, no?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move to resume consideration Senate Bill number 1574. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
This is an act establishing the Philippine Energy Research and Policy Institute. Mr. President, we are in the period of amendments. May we recognize the sponsor for a few more amendments, Mr. President. Senator Gatchalian.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Mr. President, using the amended copy as of September 17, 2018, we have very few minor amendments, Mr. President. And let's start on page 3, line 22. In the word institutes, insert an apostrophe between the letter E and the letter S. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
On page 3, line 27, delete the word UP. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
On page 4, line 13, insert the word in capital letters UP before the word President. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
And on page 6, line 4, delete the comma after the word UP. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
That's it, Mr. President. Thank you.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. With that, there are no further amendments. We'd like to close the period of amendments.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
Institute, boss. Mr. President, we'd like to move to approve, with the permission of the body, Senate Bill number 1574 on second reading. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
We move to suspend consideration of the same.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
May we ask for a few minutes suspension, Mr. President?
Session suspended. Break.
Senator Gatchalian, wala. Senator Win. Yung mga staff lang, nawawala. We have additional reference of business. You want to give your
Second.
speech? Okay, thanks.
Dalawa to, ah.
Ready to issue, Mr. President?
Session is resumed.
Thank you, Mr. President. While we're waiting for Senator Sherwin Gatchalian to deliver his sponsorship speech on RIF clarification, I move for the additional reference of business.
The Secretary will proceed with the reference of business.
Second additional reference of business, committee reports. Committee report number 442, submitted jointly by the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, and Finance on House number 7777, introduced by Representative Cortez et al., entitled, An Act Separating the Cabangahan National High School, Cordova National High School Extension in Barangay Dayas, Municipality of Cordova, Province of Cebu, from the Cabangahan National High School, converting it into an independent national high school to be known as Cordova National High School, and appropriating funds therefore, recommending its approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Escudero.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 443, submitted jointly by the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, Ways and Means and Finance on House number 7784, introduced by Representative Garcia et al., entitled, An Act Creating a High School for the Arts in the Province of Bataan, to be known as the Bataan National High School for the Arts, and appropriating funds therefore, recommending its approval without amendment, taking into consideration Senate number 1693, sponsor Senator Escudero.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 444, submitted by the Committee on Education, Arts and Culture on House number 7713, introduced by Representatives Fortuno and Durano, entitled, An Act Changing the Name of Inoyonan High School in Barangay Inoyonan, Municipality of Bula, Province of Camarines Sur, to Felipe P. Panton High School, recommending its approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Escudero.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 445, submitted jointly by the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, and Finance on House number 7775, introduced by Representative Ceriles et al., entitled, An Act Converting the Bayog National High School in Barangay Kahayagan, Municipality of Bayog, Province of Zamboanga del Sur, International Technical Vocational High School, to be known as Bayog National Technical Vocational High School, and appropriating funds therefore, recommending its approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Escudero.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 446, submitted jointly by the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, and Finance on House number 7776, introduced by Representative Agabao et al., entitled, An Act Separating the Dabubu High School Annex in Barangay Sinawangan Sur, Municipality of San Agustin, Province of Isabela, from the Dabubu High School, converting it into an independent national high school to be known as Southeastern Region High School, and appropriating funds therefore, recommending its approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Escudero.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 447, submitted jointly by the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, and Finance on House number 7166, introduced by Representative Hofer et al., entitled, An Act Converting the Cabasalan Institute of Technology in the Municipality of Cabasalan, Province of Zamboanga, Sibugay, into the Zamboanga Sibugay Polytechnic Institute, and appropriating funds therefore, recommending its approval with amendments, sponsor Senator Escudero.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 448, submitted jointly by the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, Ways and Means and Finance on House number 7733, introduced by Representative Co et al., entitled, An Act Converting the Dr. Emilio B. Espinosa Sr. Memorial State College of Agriculture and Technology in the Municipality of Mandawan, Province of Masbate, into a state university to be known as the Dr. Emilio B. Espinosa Sr. Masbate State University, and appropriating funds therefore, recommending its approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Escudero.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 449, submitted jointly by the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, and Finance on House number 5576, introduced by Representative Pensar et al., entitled, an act establishing a career guidance and counseling program for all secondary schools and appropriating funds, therefore recommending its approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Escudero.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 450 is submitted jointly by the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture and Finance on House number 7768, introduced by Representative Zubiri et al., entitled An Act Separating the Bokbok National High School Kiara Annex in Barangay Kiara, Municipality of Don Carlos, Province of Bukidnon, from the Bokbok National High School, converting it into an independent national high school to be known as Kiara National High School and appropriating funds, therefore recommending its approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Escudero.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 451, submitted jointly by the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture and Finance on House number 7767, introduced by Representative Acosta et al., entitled An Act Separating the Siksikan National High School Annex in Barangay Santa Monica, Puerto Princesa City, Province of Palawan, from the Siksikan National High School, converting it into an independent national high school to be known as Santa Monica National High School and appropriating funds, therefore recommending its approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Escudero.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 452, submitted by the Committee on Education, Arts and Culture on House number 6724, introduced by Representative Almario et al., entitled An Act Changing the Name of Lupon School of Fisheries in Lupon, Davao Oriental into the Davao Oriental Polytechnic Institute, recommending its approval with amendments, taking into consideration Senate number 1767, sponsor Senator Escudero.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 453, submitted by the Committee on Education, Arts and Culture on House number 7714, introduced by Representative Ungab et al., entitled An Act Changing the Name of Tawan-Tawan Elementary School in Barangay Tawan-Tawan, Baguio District, Davao City to Rosalia Aglay Ayag Elementary School, recommending its approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Escudero.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 454, submitted jointly by the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture and Finance on House number 7264, introduced by Representative Go et al., entitled An Act Establishing the Cordillera State Polytechnic Skills Institute, integrating the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority, TESTA Training Centers, and TESTA Supervised State-Run Technical Vocational Institutions, TBIs, in the Cordillera Administrative Region and appropriating funds, therefore recommending its approval with amendments, sponsor Senator Escudero.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 455, submitted jointly by the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture and Finance on House number 7769, introduced by Representative Quaresma et al., entitled An Act Establishing a National High School in Barangay Pinayag, Municipality of Cayapa, Province of Nueva Vizcaya, to be known as Pinayag National High School and appropriating funds, therefore recommending its approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Escudero.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 456, submitted by the Committee on Education, Arts and Culture on Senate number 1669, introduced by Senator Soto III, entitled An Act Recognizing Faith Academy as an educational institution of international character and providing for mechanisms on the grant of certain prerogatives conducive to its growth, recommending its approval with amendments, taking into consideration Senate number 1703, sponsor Senator Escudero.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 457, submitted jointly by the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, Health and Demography, Ways and Means and Finance on House number 3222, introduced by Representative Cayetano et al., entitled An Act Establishing a National Vision Screening Program for Kindergarten Pupils and appropriating funds, therefore recommending its approval with amendments, taking into consideration Senate number 1706, sponsor Senator Escudero.
To the calendar for ordinary business. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with the permission of the body, we move to elect Senator Manny Pacquiao as chairman of the Committee on Ethics, Senate President Tito Soto. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Chair hears none. Motion is approved. Senator Manny Pacquiao is elected chairman of the Committee on Ethics.
And as well, to replace him, as he was a member of the committee, is with the permission of the body, we'd like to move to elect Senator Grace Poe to be member of the Ethics Committee.
Any objection? There being none, Senator Grace Poe is elected member of the Committee on Ethics.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'd like to move to resume consideration on Senate Bill number 1998. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Chair hears none. Senate Bill
98.
Consideration is in order.
Thank you. This is the bill on rice tarification. Earlier, Senator Ralph Recto was supposed to deliver his sponsorship speech. He had submitted to the Secretariat already, Mr. President, and we should just insert to the records his sponsorship speech.
The co-sponsorship speech of Senator Ralph Recto, the President Pro Tem, will be inserted into the records.
Thank you, Mr. President.
This bill has already been sponsored by Senator
Yes.
Cynthia Villar.
Yes, and to also deliver his co-sponsorship speech, Mr. President, we will recognize Senator Sherwin Gatchalian.
Senator Sherwin Gatchalian is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, in addition to the worthy insights offered by the principal sponsor and other co-sponsors of Senate Bill number 1998, allow me to add my own insights, primarily focused on how this important rice tarification measure will benefit Filipino consumers by driving down the market price of quality rice. The current state of the law greatly restricts the flow of imported rice into our country. The National Food Authority holds a tight grip over the rice trade through its power to regulate rice imports, as well as its power to issue import licenses to private traders. This frustratingly dysfunctional regime on the importation of rice into the Philippines has resulted in an anti-consumer status quo for decades. Simply put, the Filipino consumers have had to spend more money at the market for lower quality rice. An unfortunate example of this anti-consumer status quo is the recent Bokbok rice incident. In addition, tight import regulations have rendered the market unable to adapt to sudden supply and demand fluctuations, thus resulting in frequent rice shortages over the years. Mr. President, it is sadly ironic to see such a dysfunctional state of affairs concerning rice, which is the most essential Filipino staple food. However, the poorest 30% of household in terms of income. This state of affairs is not just ironic, it poses a real threat to their food security. According to June 2018 data called from the Philippine Statistics Authority, households in the bottom 30% spend 22.69% of their income, almost one-fourth of their money, on rice alone. By comparison, the average household spends less than half of this amount on rice, or 9.59% of their income to be exact. Now, one of the major drivers behind the record inflation we have been experiencing is the rising prices of essential foodstuff, including rice. Thus, considering the significantly larger share of rice in the poor CPI, it is not surprising that according to PSA CPI statistics, that adjusted year-on-year inflation rate for the bottom 30% in June 2018 of 6.59% was significantly greater than the 5.2 headline inflation rate. Indeed, the increase in rice prices from June of 2017 to June of 2018 contributed 1.16% of the entire 6.59% poor inflation rate, which is extremely significant for a single commodity. Clearly then, the dysfunctional state of rice market is taking its toll on the poor by exacerbating the burden of inflation and making it harder for them to put enough rice on their plates. In this context, it is clear why the executive and legislative branches have come together to expedite the passage of this legislation. Abolishing quantitative restrictions on rice and replacing them with a reasonable tarification scheme will increase the supply of quality and affordable rice in local retail markets and provide consumer savings to families suffering under the burden of rising food inflation. To illustrate, I have prepared some computations. PSA data show that as of August 28, 2018, the average price of regular milled rice on the market was 42 pesos per kilogram. Now, most of our imported rice is sourced from our ASEAN neighbors, Thailand and Vietnam. Under this bill, the default tariff on ASEAN rice imports would be set at a preferential rate of 35%. At 35% tariff rate, the projected market price of regular quality Thai rice would be 30.2 pesos per kilogram and 28.59 pesos per kilogram for regular quality Vietnamese rice. Thus, at the regular tariff rate, consumers would save as much as 13.41 pesos per kilogram compared to the current average market price. For an average family consuming 450 kilograms of rice per year, this would result in an annual savings of 6,034.50 pesos. This would be enough to buy more than 4 50-kilogram sacks of Vietnamese rice at a new lower price. At this point, I must mention that the creation of a tarification system on rice practically eliminates the need for a body such as the NFA. Therefore, in order to further strengthen the domestic rice markets for consumers and farmers alike, it is my intention to file in due time a bill to abolish the National Food Authority. In sum, Mr. President, Senate Bill 1998 is a strong counter-inflationary measure which is poised to provide immediate relief to Filipino consumers by saving them thousands of pesos per year on rice. These savings can be applied to other basic necessities such as transportation, education, and medicine, among others. Most importantly, this bill will strengthen food security among poor and near-poor families by helping them put enough rice on their plates to keep their stomachs full and happy. Considering the immense benefits of this timely measure, Mr. President, I join the principal sponsor, Senator Cynthia Villar, and my fellow sponsors in pushing for the immediate passage of this legislation. It is time to fix the dysfunctional state of the Philippine rice sector and finally bring down the criminally high market price of rice to reasonable levels. Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend consideration on Senate Bill number 1998. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move that we transfer from the calendar of ordinary business to the calendar for special orders. Two bills, Mr. President. Senate Bill number 1712 and House Bill number 6129. I so move, Mr. President.
Are they of the same nature?
One, yes, Mr. President. One is, they're both sports training centers. One in Sarangani, the other in Llano del Norte, Mr. President. But if you wish to, that I do it one by one, it's all right, Mr. President.
Yes, it's all right, but yes, it's better if you do it one by one.
Okay, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move to transfer the calendar of ordinary business to the calendar of special orders committee report, or Senate Bill number 1712 under committee report number 438.
Any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we consider Senate Bill number 1712. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, consideration is in order.
May we ask the Secretary to read the title?
Secretary will read the title of the measure.
Senate Bill 1712, an act establishing the Sarangani Sports Training Center in the municipality of Alabel, province of Sarangani, and appropriating funds therefor.
Thank you, Mr. President. To sponsor the measure, we would like to recognize the distinguished People's Champ, Senator Emmanuel Manny Pacquiao, Mr. President.
Senator Manny Pacquiao is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Giniginawa ko. Mr. President, I rise before this August chamber as a chairman of your Committee on Sports and as an advocate of sports development. The different islands in our country are breeding grounds for talented young athletes. capable of showcasing their world-class talent beyond our borders. With this, our senators have seen the need for supporting our athletes in their endeavor for success. Our very own Senators Sani Angara, recognizing the need for greater government support, sponsored the bill creating and establishing a state-of-the-art and highly scientific sports complex known as the Philippine Amateur Sports Training Center, which shall benefit the national athletes. It is my honor to co-author this measure with Senator Bam Aquino and Senator Joel Villanueva. Since the government has already seen the need for sports development on a national scale, the local levels has concurred for the need to rehabilitate and construct training centers in the provinces of the benefit of the athletes and their communities. Mr. President, we certainly lack facilities and training centers for proper preparation and training in most regions. As a solution provider, your Committee on Sports has acted on 2 measures addressing this concern. Mr. President, in 1992, Sarangani was made an independent province by virtue of Republic Act 7228, separating it from the province of South Cotabato. The seat of government is in Alabel, its capital town. Since its creation, the province campaigned in nurturing youth potentials through the benefits of sports by preparing them to be in the roster of national athletes. Sarangani is one of the provinces comprising Tuxargen or Region 12. In the recent years, Region 12 ranked number 7 or 8 in the Palarong Pangbansa. This manifests that a number of promising athletes are in the rise at the region, amassed medals in archery, harness, athletics, baseball, gymnastics, taekwondo, boxing, swimming, sipa takraw, tennis, and volleyball as they compete in national sports events. The current structures need a total upgrade, modifications, and new edifice to be at par with gold producing countries. The proposed facility will be strategically contracted inside the capital premises in the municipality of Alabel, Sarangani Province. The proposed plan include an indoor multipurpose facility, open warehouse structures for tennis, basketball, volleyball, badminton, boxing and combat sports, taekwondo, weightlifting, to be constructed also in an indoor track oval with football field, baseball fields, swimming pool, including a building for athlete dormitories. Lanao del Norte, on the other hand, has an existing training center located in the municipality of Tubod, known as the Mindanao Civil Center Sports Center. It only occupies a small amount of the massive land where it is situated. This makes it conducive for improvement. Currently, Mr. President, the facility has an Olympic-sized swimming pool, a warm pool, rubberized oval, gymnasium with an international standard, a rubberized stadium, a 4 tennis court, an archery area, a football area, and a motocross racetrack. The number one sport in the province is tennis, Mr. President. They also excel in basketball, archery, sipa takraw, and in archery. With the available facilities available in Lanao del Norte, they managed to produce athletes such as Bunel Balingit, Junrek Valoria, Marlon Tapales, and Brent Sigmund Cortis. Aside from this talented, Mr. President, individuals, our recently Asian Games weightlifting gold winner and Rio Olympics silver medalist Hidilyn Diaz, hails from Lanao del Norte. Huwag po nating sayangin ang potensyal ng ating mga atleta at makakuha ng medalya. Naniwala ako na ang susi sa pagkuha natin ng ginto ay ang mabigyan ng atensyon ang mga atletang nasa probinsya sa pamamagitan ng sa mga pasilidad na kanilang magagamit. Mr. President, we need to expand the government's support to our athletes on the grassroots. In this 17th Congress, we can start with the province of Sarangani and the province of Lanao del Norte. The creation of the sports training centers in Sarangani and Lanao del Norte will provide athletes and potential talents with world-class training facilities and venues for sports tournament. With this, I urge my colleague for the immediate pass of the following bills. Senate Bill number 1712 in consideration of House Bill number 6130 under Committee Report 438, an act establishing the Sarangani Sports Training Center in the municipality of Alabel, province of Sarangani, and appropriating funds thereof. And House Bill number 6129 under Committee Report 342, an act establishing the Lanao del Norte Sports Training Center to be located in the municipality of Tubod, province of Lanao del Norte, and appropriating funds therefore. Through the passage of these measures, we will be able to promote physical wellness through sports. We will not only produce exceptional athletes, but healthy citizenry marked with discipline, patience, perseverance, resilience, and excellence. Mr. President, let us support our young people who are loaded with potentials. Let us ensure a bright future home for them by prioritizing grassroots development. Maraming salamat po, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes.
Mr. President, for our colleagues to study the measure further, we move to suspend consideration on the said measure, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, the consideration of the measure is hereby suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President, but as I tried to, we tried to move earlier to open both measures so that he can do a sponsorship speech for both bills.
Omnibus.
So we'll have to, what I'll do, Mr. President, with
yes,
the permission of the body, transfer from the calendar of ordinary business to the calendar of special orders the second bill, which is House Bill number 6129. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, House Bill 6129, consideration is in order.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we consider House Bill number 6129.
Any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, to...
The Secretary will read the
yes, to
title
read
of
the
the
title
measure.
of the measure.
House Bill number 6129, an act establishing the Lanao del Norte Sports Training Center to be located in the municipality of Tubod, province of Lanao del Norte, and appropriating funds therefore.
Thank you, Mr. President. The distinguished sponsor had asked me that he will just insert to the records the sponsorship speech on the establishment of the Lanao del Norte Sports Training Center in Tubod, Lanao del Norte.
May we know if it is practically the same sponsorship speech that he just delivered earlier? If so, we may accept that, but otherwise,
Yes,
it would
Mr.
be
President.
proper that he deliver a sponsorship speech for the bill.
The question is addressed to me, sir, or addressed to the sponsor? It's the same, it's going to be the same speech, Mr.
So
President.
the motion is to adopt the sponsorship speech.
Yes, the
All
same
right.
sponsorship speech.
All right. Any objection? Chair hears none. Motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. To allow our colleagues to study the measure, may we move to suspend consideration of the same.
Any objection? Chair hears none. Consideration of the measure is suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. Finally, we have just local bills to be tackled. May I move to resume consideration, Mr. President? Saan na ba yun? House Bill number 1865 and the committee report number 313. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
May we recognize the sponsor, Senator Sani Angara, to sponsor the measure. This is an act declaring March 21 of every year a non-working holiday in the municipality of San Fabian.
Senator Sani Angara is recognized to sponsor the measure.
Unless Senator Dillon wants to ask questions, I think no one else is interested, Mr. President.
Foundation Day, yeah. Yan ang sponsor na. Thank you, Mr. President. San Fabian, Pangasinan, their Foundation Day. Thank you, Mr. President. There being no member who had wished to interpolate, we move to close the period of interpellation.
Any objection? There being none, period of interpellation is hereby closed.
Mr. President, amendments?
No amendments, Mr.
No
President.
amendments, Mr. President. We move to close the period of amendments.
Any objection? There being none, period of amendments is hereby closed.
Mr. President, I move to approve on second reading House Bill number 1865. I so move.
Any objection? Chair hears none. House Bill 1865 is approved on second reading.
Mr. President, I move to suspend consideration on House Bill
Consideration of the measure is suspended.
Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration House Bill number 2692. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Chair hears none. Motion is approved.
This is an act declaring October 28th of every year a special non-working holiday in the province of Davao Occidental in commemoration of its founding anniversary. We move to recognize the sponsor, Senator Sani Angara, for interpellation.
Senator Sani Angara is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. No interpellation.
Thank you, Mr. President. There being no interpellations from our colleagues, we move to close the period of interpellation.
Any objection? There being none, period of interpellation is closed.
Mr. President, there being no amendments, we move to close the period of amendments, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, period of amendment is closed.
Mr. President, we move to approve on second reading House Bill number 2692. I so move.
Any objection? Chair hears none. House Bill 2692 is approved on second reading.
Thank you. Move to suspend consideration of the same, Mr. President.
Consideration measure is suspended.
Yamashita, wala. We move to... One second.
Consideration of the measure is suspended.
There being no other matters? I'm sorry, Mr. President, one last. We elected Senator Grace Poe twice to the Ethics Committee. Apparently, Mr. President, she was still a member of the Ethics Committee.
Still a member, all right.
So instead of Senator Grace Poe, I withdraw my motion earlier and instead elect Senator Sherwin Gatchalian to the position of member of the
All
Ethics
right.
Committee.
Any objection? There being none, Senator Sherwin Gatchalian is elected chairman, selected member of the Committee on Ethics.
Not now, okay.
Not now.
Yamashita. On the other measures, Mr. President, on the holiday, I'm just curious. There's one pending holiday on the commemoration of Yamashita's capture. A surrender.
Surrender.
Yes, Mr. President.
Yeah.
Yes, there's already one approved. Just out of curiosity, were there Filipinos who captured Yamashita? Because if there were Filipinos who captured Yamashita, wouldn't it be better that we actually recognize the Filipino who captured Yamashita rather than recognizing Yamashita? I think even in Japan, I don't think they recognize Yamashita. It's only in the Philippines that he's very sikat.
Mr. President,
he
may
was,
I-
he
if I
was
may?
co-
Yeah,
If I may comment?
Before you comment,
Yes, Mr. President.
the way I know General Yamashita, he was going to be tried as a
War criminal.
as a war criminal. So yes, Senator.
Mr. President, I think the holiday is not in honor of, I think we have to clarify that it's not in his honor. It is in honor of the surrender of General Yamashita. What we passed was the bill to make it a non-working holiday, the bill of Congressman Teddy Bagilat of Ifugao to commemorate his surrender in Ifugao, where he surrendered to because of the efforts of the guerrillas. Twice, Mr. President. He surrendered in Ifugao
On September 2.
September 2.
I promise there is no third holiday, Mr. President. The second, yeah, the first time was September 2 in Ifugao. To a captain, an American captain. And this was through the efforts of the guerrillas there. That's why Congressman Bagilat said, it is in honor of the guerrillas who fought against Yamashita. And the bill of Congressman Mark Go, which is now on the floor on our calendar, is to celebrate the next day where he surrendered in Baguio City. And Congressman Go says it was a very emotional moment for them because the Japanese had practically taken over Baguio City at that time. In fact, President Quezon and his cabinet were in Baguio at the time. So it's an important chapter in our history, actually. And they even gave Japanese names to Cannon Road, to Burnham Park. They gave Japanese names to all of these. So again, it's not in honor of Mr. President. It's not in honor of General Yamashita.
There is an inconsistency in the story of the congressman. President Quezon was already dead during that time.
That's what he's saying. That's it. And the NHCP,
He
Mr.
died
President,
before the end of the war.
the NHCP is endorsing both bills. Yeah.
Really?
Yes. Yes. We require, the committee required the NHCP to endorse all the bills that we are sponsoring, Mr. President. So.
Could we just call it the liberation of Baguio, Mr. Senate President? Baguio Liberation Day rather than Yamashita. Pinasikat natin si Yamashita. Sikat na nga siya sa treasure niya, Mr. President. The same guy with the treasure, Yamashita treasure. I don't know. Maybe we'll ask the sponsor. Would the sponsor know if it is true about the treasure of Yamashita?
What is the year that Yamashita surrendered?
1945, Mr. President.
1945.
Yeah.
Quezon died in 1944.
No, I stand corrected, Mr. President, because his introductory note says that the city was Baguio City was politically and economically strategic, frequently housing President Manuel Quezon. So I stand corrected on that. He was not in the city at the time that Yamashita surrendered.
Okay.
He's just
Perhaps
mentioned
he was there in spirit. You know, Baguio.
There are a lot of spirits in Baguio, Mr. President.
Baguio is known for that.
Good one, yes. Well, with that, Mr. President, for another day, perhaps we can discuss that measure. I know the Senate Minority Floor Leader has a few more questions on that issue. So, with
I can see the wrinkled forehead of the Minority Leader.
With that, Mr. President, I move that we adjourn session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Wednesday, September 19, 2018. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, the session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, September 19, 2018. Tayo na Yamashita yan.